Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it's from the two people you'd trust with your life. For 4 years, I thought my marriage was solid. For 4 years, I believed my mother was my biggest supporter. They laughed together at family dinners. They prayed together in our living room. My mum even told me how lucky I was to have a man like him, a man she said would never break my heart. But there were cracks I didn't see, moments that felt off but were gone before I could question them. A late-night phone call my husband wouldn't explain. My mum's sudden habit of dressing up whenever she just happened to drop by. The way they'd exchange glances across the table, as if they were sharing a joke I wasn't in on. I brushed it all off, because suspicion felt like betrayal. Then, one night, I found something that didn't just confirm my worst fears. It made me realize my marriage had been over before it even began. And my mother, she wasn't the woman I thought she was. If you discovered that your own blood and the man you married had been lying to you for 4 years straight, what would you do? Would you walk away quietly? Or would you make sure everyone paid for what they'd done? In the beginning, nothing seemed unusual. My husband, Daniel Carter, was the kind of man people respected. He worked long hours as a financial consultant, kept to himself, and never gave me a reason to question him. My mother, Evelyn, was my anchor, a retired schoolteacher who lived just 15 minutes away. After my father died, she stepped into every gap in my life, showing up unannounced with groceries, helping with house repairs, and making sure I was taken care of. The three of us had a comfortable rhythm. Sunday dinners at my place, birthdays celebrated together, holidays planned months in advance. People used to tell me how lucky I was, how rare it was to have a husband and a mother who got along so well. And I believed them. But when I look back now, I can see the small moments I ignored, the subtle changes that didn't make sense at the time. My mother started visiting the house when I wasn't home. She'd say she just wanted to drop something off for you and Daniel, but she never seemed to leave right away. Daniel, who used to text me when he was working late, stopped giving me updates. And then there were the unexplained expenses, dinners charged to our joint account, receipts from places I'd never been. At first I told myself it was nothing. Married life came with secrets, sure, but not the kind that destroyed families. I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. And when my best friend asked why my mum seemed to spend more time with Daniel than with me, I laughed it off. But the first real shift came on a Wednesday evening in late October. I came home early from work, expecting to find the house empty. Instead, I saw my mum's car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see her and Daniel standing close, too close. Their voices were low, their expressions unreadable. When I walked in, they both acted startled, as though I'd interrupted something. My mother grabbed her purse and said she was just leaving. Daniel avoided my eyes for the rest of the night. I told myself it was just an odd moment, that families sometimes had awkward interactions, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. And once it took root, it started growing in ways I couldn't control. This wasn't the kind of story where suspicion faded over time. It was the kind that demanded answers. Answers I didn't realize would come at a cost I wasn't prepared to pay. For weeks after that Wednesday evening, the image of Daniel and my mother standing together in the kitchen refused to leave my mind. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe they were discussing something personal, maybe even something about me. But the thing about suspicion is, once it creeps in, it doesn't just fade. It lingers. It festers. And it makes you start noticing things you'd usually overlook. I began to pay closer attention to the small details. My mother's perfume, the one she only wore on special occasions, lingered in our guest bathroom long after she'd supposedly stopped by for just a few minutes. Daniel's shirt started smelling faintly of her hand lotion. Conversations between them at family dinners were filled with inside jokes I didn't get, references to moments I hadn't been there for. But what really made my stomach turn was the shift in their behavior toward me. If I came into the room, the conversation would stop. They'd exchange a glance, just a second too long, and then act as if nothing happened. And while Daniel had always been attentive, His attention started to feel performative, like he was overcompensating, as if my noticing too much could unravel something he was trying to keep together. Then there was the phone call. One Friday afternoon, I was at home folding laundry when Daniel's phone buzzed on the counter. The name Evelyn lit up the screen. My mother. I picked it up instinctively, thinking it might be urgent. But when I answered, she didn't say hello. She didn't even sound surprised. She just whispered, "Are you still coming tonight?" I froze. "Mum, it's me." Silence. Then the call disconnected. I confronted her later that evening, asking what she meant. She brushed it off with a laugh, saying she must have dialed by mistake and was talking about a charity event she assumed Daniel had mentioned. But when I asked Daniel, he claimed not to know what I was talking about at all. Their stories didn't line up, and they both seemed far too comfortable lying to my face. That's when I started keeping a journal. Every odd look, every unexpected visit, every slip in their stories. I wrote it all down. And the more I documented, the clearer the pattern became. My mother's visits to the house increased on days I worked late. Daniel's work hours started stretching into the night, but his paycheck didn't reflect overtime. And on 2 separate occasions, a neighbour mentioned seeing my mother's car parked in our driveway long after I'd left for work in the morning. I wasn't ready to believe it, not fully. After all, this was my mother, the woman who raised me, who sat by my hospital bed when I was sick, who swore she'd protect me no matter what. And Daniel, the man I'd vowed to love, honour and trust for the rest of my life. But the truth has a way of knocking on the door when you least expect it. And in my case, it came one cold December night, when an accident exposed more than either of them ever intended to reveal. It was the week before Christmas. The streets were lit with strings of gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and frost. Daniel had told me he'd be working late, a last-minute project at the office. My mother, as usual, had offered to stop by with a casserole, just so you don't eat alone. By now, these gestures felt less like kindness and more like a performance, but I agreed, if only to keep her close enough to watch. That evening, she came over wearing a red dress, not one of her usual cosy sweaters, but something I'd seen her wear to dinner parties. She stayed for an hour, chatting idly, then claimed she had to meet a friend for a late coffee. An hour later, I realised Daniel had left his work laptop at home, a habit of his, one he'd never admit to because it undercut his working late excuse. On impulse, I decided to take it to him. No warning, no call ahead. Just me, driving through icy streets, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself I'd be the good wife, the supportive partner, but I never made it to his office. About 3 blocks from our house, as I passed the corner near the small bed and breakfast on Elm Street, I spotted a car in the lot. My mother's car. I slowed down, my pulse hammering in my ears. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe she was meeting her friend here. But then I saw him. Daniel. Standing outside one of the rooms, laughing, holding a small gift bag in one hand. Moments later, the door opened and my mother stepped out. They exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. The kind of look that holds history, intimacy, and secrecy. Then, without hesitation, Daniel leaned in and kissed her. Not a quick, friendly peck. A slow, deliberate kiss. I couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to the sight of them, my husband and my mother, framed by the yellow light spilling from the room. I wanted to get out of the car, to scream, to confront them both right there on the frozen pavement. But instead, I sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I drove home in a fog. My mind replayed the scene over and over, each time cutting deeper. The red dress, the gift bag, the way his hand lingered on her back. 4 years. Had it really been going on that long, or longer? When Daniel came home later that night, he smelled faintly of my mother's perfume. He kissed me on the cheek and mumbled something about crazy deadlines. I forced myself to nod, to pretend. I didn't want them to know I knew. Not yet. Because in that moment I realized something. If I wanted the truth, I'd need proof, and proof required patience. That night, I pulled out an old digital recorder I used during college lectures. I charged my phone, cleared space for hours of audio, and started mapping out every step they took, every gap in their stories. If they'd been lying for 4 years, I could wait a little longer to make sure their lies buried them both. Carmen didn't go to the police. Not yet. She needed more than anger, she needed evidence. She knew if she confronted them too soon, they'd twist it, cry innocence, and somehow make her the villain. No, they had to be caught so completely that even they couldn't deny it. So she played her part. For the next month, Carmen became the perfect wife and daughter. She smiled when they were all together, laughed at her husband's dry jokes, and let her mother squeeze her hand at family dinners. To them, it was business as usual. To Carmen, it was surveillance. She started with a notebook, a cheap spiral-bound one she hid inside the lining of her winter coat. Every day she recorded times, places, and strange interactions. How her husband lingered at the back door when her mother happened to be walking by. How they exchanged glances that lasted a fraction too long. How her mother's perfume lingered in the guest bathroom, even though her mother supposedly never used that bathroom. Then came the tech. Carmen installed a voice-activated recording app on her phone, which she discreetly placed in the kitchen whenever she left the house. She bought a small hidden camera disguised as a digital clock and placed it in the guest bedroom, the one that was rarely used unless Carmen was away or resting. The first week she caught nothing. The second week, faint audio, her husband's voice saying, "Not now, she's in the shower." It made her skin crawl. By the third week, the hidden camera delivered the kind of footage that hollowed her out. It wasn't just touches, it was intimacy. Her own mother, smiling at her husband in that way women do when they're comfortable, when they feel safe. Her husband brushing a strand of hair from her mother's cheek, a gesture he'd done to Carmen countless times in their early days. They laughed together. They shared wine. They moved around the room like this was their home. The more Carmen recorded, the more she realized this wasn't an affair in the shadows. It was a relationship, one that had existed for years, just under her nose. The betrayal wasn't in stolen glances or hurried encounters. It was in the normalcy of it all. Then came the night that cemented everything. Carmen had been at work late, finishing a project for a client. She came home earlier than expected, parking her car down the street so the sound wouldn't give her away. The house was mostly dark except for the warm glow spilling from the kitchen. She slipped off her shoes and stepped softly down the hall, her heart pounding so loud she feared they'd hear it. The voices were clear now. Her mother was seated on the kitchen stool, a glass of wine in hand. Her husband leaned casually against the counter, smiling at her like a man in love. Her mother's voice was low but confident. 4 years. And she still hasn't caught on. You'd think by now. Her husband laughed. She trusts us too much. The clink of glasses. Then, the sound of a kiss. Not hurried, not guilty, just certain. Carmen froze. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in their comfort, their lack of fear, the quiet arrogance of two people who thought they were untouchable. She backed away, her body trembling. Her hand covered her mouth, not to keep quiet, but to stop the scream building in her throat. She made it to her bedroom, shut the door silently, and sat on the edge of her bed in complete darkness. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't break down. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment of the past 4 years with new, sickening clarity. She realized she had been living with actors, people who looked her in the eye every day while dismantling her life in secret. The next morning, she smiled at them both over breakfast, because Carmen wasn't going to confront them, not yet. Now, she didn't just want the truth. She wanted them to pay. And when she made her move, there would be no way back. Carmen had enough evidence to destroy them both. Hours of audio, weeks of footage, dozens of text messages she'd secretly pulled from an old cloud backup her husband never bothered to delete. But evidence wasn't enough for her anymore. She didn't just want them caught, she wanted them exposed. Her plan started with an invitation. A family dinner, just the three of them. She told them it was to celebrate her husband's recent work promotion. She cooked his favorite meal, set the table with the good china, even put fresh flowers in the middle like it was any other night. They arrived smiling, unaware of what was coming. Her husband kissed her cheek casually. Her mother hugged her, calling her baby girl, the way she always had. Carmen smiled at both of them, poured the wine, and made small talk. When dessert came out, Carmen excused herself to grab the whipped cream from the fridge. But instead, she reached for the small remote in her pocket. A click. The TV on the wall behind them flickered to life. At first, it was silent, just the image of the guest bedroom from the hidden camera. Then the audio filled the room. Her mother's voice, laughing softly. Her husband whispering, "She'll never know." Then, the unmistakable sound of a kiss. Both of them froze. Her husband's fork clinked against the plate. Her mother's hands trembled as she reached for her glass but didn't drink. Carmen didn't say a word. She let the footage play, scene after scene, weeks of betrayal condensed into minutes, their private world spilling into the open in the same dining room where they'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays together. When the final clip ended, Carmen walked back to the table, calm as stone. "You've been lying to me for 4 years," she said, "and I want you both to understand something. I'm done." Her husband tried to speak, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't explain, don't beg, don't lie. You've already done enough of that." Then she slid 2 envelopes across the table. One was divorce papers, the other, a legal notice for her mother to vacate the house within 30 days, the same house Carmen had been paying the mortgage on for years. Her husband went pale. Her mother's mouth fell open. "You can't do this," her mother hissed. "I already have," Carmen replied. "And by the way, the footage? It's already backed up. My lawyer has it, my friends have it. If either of you try to come near me, speak to me, or smear my name, everyone will see exactly who you are." They stared at her, realizing there was nothing left to say. No way to twist it. No way to undo it. Carmen stood, took her glass of wine, and walked out of the room without looking back. By the next week, her husband was living in a cheap apartment on the edge of town. Her mother had gone to stay with a distant cousin 2 states away. And Carmen? She was finally sleeping through the night. They thought their secret would stay buried forever. But secrets have a way of rotting through the walls. And when the truth comes out, it doesn't just break you. It burns everything you built, leaving nothing but ashes. If you were Carmen, would you have destroyed them publicly or walked away quietly? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.